MSW Media.
So yeah, now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Welcome to episode 201 of Clean Up on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday, November 27th, 2024. I'm Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Struck. Today, we'll go over yet more Trump junk drawer nominations and an update on Trump's 34 felony count conviction. Still standing in New York.
Still standing, yes. Plus, we have a contempt motion and a threat of pain of contempt against Rudy Giuliani, which we're always happy to end the show with. But first, we have an announcement, and I'm sad. After nearly 2 years together, Pete, you're leaving the show. And we do have a new co-host slated to start next week. We'll talk about that in a minute. And we can't really say why you're leaving, but it's not because you don't like us. And I just want to say that this has been really, really amazing hosting this show with you, and I'm going to miss you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm going to miss you too. I mean, this is a super, super sad day. And it's been great and amazing. And I look forward to coming back every now and then if there's some breaking CI news or just for general good of the order on bonus episodes or happy hours or something. But yeah, super sad. The dramatic foreshadowing is I think everybody listening is going to be utterly thrilled with the new co-host. And then you're going to talk about that in a second. But it's been amazing. And just, the amount of things that we covered and continue to cover going forward are just tremendous. And so I'm sad too, and I'll miss you too, and all the listeners out there. Love you all, and can't thank you enough for your support over the 2 years, and truly humbled by all the goodness from everybody. And whether that's posts or emails or get-togethers or live tapings, it's just been an extraordinary experience. So I'm gonna miss you too, but I'll be back every now and then. And with that, Allison, who do we have waiting? Who's Bachelor number 2 waiting behind the curtain?
Well, he's taller.
Very much.
So when I thought about who should come in as co-host starting next week, I wanted either a lawyer, right, that could get into the wonkiness of some of these cases that we're going to continue to follow, or someone in law enforcement like you, right? And since we're going to be continuing to cover the state cases against some of the architects of January 6th, minus Trump, of course, I decided it would be best not only to have someone was in law enforcement, but someone who was in law enforcement and was at the Capitol on January 6th, someone who testified before the January 6th committee about what justice might look like for him. So I am very honored to announce that former Capitol Police officer and my good friend Harry Dunn will be taking over as co-host of Clean Up on Aisle 45 next week. And together, like I said, we're going to cover the remaining January 6th and fraudulent electors cases. And we'll be welcoming lawyers and other experts like you, Pete, to join us here and provide expert analysis. So the show must go on. The show will continue. Patrons, you'll continue to get all your same benefits. And speaking of patrons, it's Hall of Fame Patron Day here on Clean Up on Aisle 45, Pete. So we want to thank you all, as we do every month. And we hope you'll continue to support us with Harry Dunn and me at the helm. We're going to need your support now more than ever. And, a lot of people, Pete, have you talked to people? Because I've talked to a lot of people. I've seen this like across social media platforms. People are kind of ditching cable news and relying more on independent media.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I know you were tweeting or on Blue Sky, whatever, it's still tweeting. I will forever say it's like making a Xerox, even if it's a photocopy on whatever platform. But yeah, I saw not only are they leaving cable news, but like our listenership and like MSW listenership is up across the board. So I think, yeah, it makes sense to me, and particularly kind of watching the last stages of the election, it's not surprising that people are trying to say, okay, I need something where I'm not getting both sided. I don't need to hear, some token commentator up there, defending some craziness that no, Trump is not a threat to democracy. He doesn't have authoritarian tendencies. You know what? That's not true. And you don't need to tell me that. So I'm glad. And Harry is amazing, right? And I know I don't know him nearly as well as you do, but the times I've spent with him, he is a decent man, strong, very charismatic, great at expressing, sort of looking behind what's going on and sort of explaining the motivations. And certainly, as a police officer, as you said, on January 6th, I mean, I am afraid, going to be seeing a large number of events that, unfortunately, I think Harry's expertise will play an extraordinarily insightful role to all of our listeners, your listeners, our listeners. It'll always be our listeners. But love Harry, and it's brilliant, and the show's even going to be better than ever. So can't wait to tune in and listen to the two of you.
Oh, thank you. And so thanks to our patrons for supporting us. If you want to become a patron, you can do so by going to patreon.com/aisle45pod, AISLE45POD. So thank you to our Hall of Famers, Deborah Kirby, Patty B, Tiffany Trump Was Adopted, Rose Flaherty, Dr. David, Suzanne Ashworth, Maris Lawson, January 20 baby. And by the way, my fellow January 20th friend, I'm moving my birthday to January 19th this year. Dirt Road Dems, at Dirt Road Dems, Maria Tovar, and Meg Alexander. Thank you so very much for supporting us. We hope you'll continue as we march forward into reporting what happens with the rest of these cases. All right, with that, let's get to today's news, and we'll start with cabinet/junk drawer appointments. First of all, after the Matt Gaetz gate debacle, where he, resigned from Congress a couple hours before a scathing House Ethics Committee report was released about him. He's nominated for Attorney General and then withdrew his name after CNN called him up and said, yeah, we're going to report a story that you actually had 2 sexual encounters with a minor. And so he withdrew his name. Oh, I'm a distraction. And then immediately, almost within minutes, Donald Trump nominated Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General, to be the Attorney General at the DOJ. Now, she's got a long history of doing Trump's bidding. She has called on Fox News for investigations into the investigators along the lines of John Durham and that kind of thing. So, Pete, look for your subpoenas in the mail.
Great. I'll just refer. Yes, I think we said this either in the bonus in the main episode. But you know what? Before I answer your subpoena, first go and get the materials from Mike Horowitz at the Inspector General's office, then go get the material from U.S. Attorney John Huber, then go get the material from U.S. Attorney Jeff Jensen, then go get the material from U.S. Attorney Jesse Liu, then go get the material from Special Counsel John Durham. Then you can also stop by and get the material from the House Judiciary Committee, the House Committee on Government Oversight Reform, the Senate Judiciary Committee. And when you look through all of that,
if you still have questions,
if you still have questions, feel free to reach out. And my now 8-year-old and everybody else, 8-year-old memory, they're gonna blow the case wide open in a minute now. They if they just look hard enough, they can find that Lindbergh baby kidnapper. I swear to you. But
well,
yeah, you know what the worst,
and this is kind of, I think, where you're about to head, because this is what Jim Jordan and Jim Comer did the whole time they were there. They would cherry pick stuff that they got, release little bits and pieces of it to make it, paste it together to make it look like something bad happened. And I imagine they're going to do that with all of y'all.
Yeah, but at some point it's like, I don't, and if they do, whatever. I mean, there's Ratcliffe already did a lot of that last time around with releasing a lot of material. At some point, there's not, they released all the and spun all the exonerating stuff. They didn't, and I wish to hell that Reveal Haynes and Joe Biden would choose to declassify and release a lot of sorry, I'm swearing on the regular episode, release some of the material that John Durham decided didn't fit the narrative, and so they needed to keep that classified. Maybe we could see both sides, but it's not like if there were things that were like, oh my God, this was a hoax, guess what? It would have been released in 2020, right? And so, again, it seems, one, that it's kind of an empty, this field has been plowed so many times. I don't know what they get out of it, and I also don't know, they're newer bogeymen, right? I mean, they're newer evil people. And to just go back and, whatever. They want to spend their time doing that, go have at it. I mean, it's...
Well, he wants to, and she, and Pam Bondi and Donald Trump want to set up a whole unit within the Department of Justice to go back and look at election fraud in 2020. So that's going to happen too. Also, she stole someone's dog after a hurricane and then fought them in court for 18 months and lost.
What is it about these people and dogs?
They
I mean,
hate
there are
dogs,
just some
man.
fundamental things like who they're stealing dogs, they're shooting dogs, they're accusing people of eating dogs. Donald Trump had that speech where he was talking about was it Zarqawi or somebody died like a dog. I mean, why do all of these people have such problematic relationships with man and woman's best friend? No offense, I'm cat owner. I'm no offense to cat owners out there, right? But
Yeah, what
how do
about
you
us
steal a
childless
dog?
cat ladies?
Allison, how do you steal a dog from somebody?
That for a
How do you steal a
hurricane
dog
victim,
from somebody?
a hurricane victim, no less. Yeah.
Really like the dog. I'm just going to keep. How do you? What on earth? Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Just.
So gross. And then also we know about her $25,000 alleged bribe. I know it was never charged, but when her office was investigating Trump University on criminal fraud charges, she received a $25,000 campaign donation from the Trump Foundation, and then bam, the charges were never filed. So there's that. So I think this is her payback, right, for her loyalty. But her, and then we've got, I think we talked about Emile Beauvais and Todd Blanche being the DAG and the PAYDAG, Principal Assistant Deputy Attorney General, once occupied by the wonderful, what was his name, O'Callahan, the beardy guy? Oh, that guy was
Ed, yeah.
Interesting work. And so he's got all of his private lawyers at the Department of Justice, which makes sense because he always treated and will treat the Department of Justice as his own private law firm, not the attorney for the people. So Pam Bondi nominated. And he didn't even wait like a day after Gates withdrew his name. He was like,
damn
fine,
Cruella
bye.
DeVille dog stealing. What? Come on. Come on.
I know. We warned everybody. It's going to be stupid. Here it is. Now, he also nominated Scott Bessent. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Bessent?
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's that or Bessent. I think it's Bessent.
As Secretary of Treasury. His former Secretary of Treasury was Mnuchin. Remember, Mnuchin had to sell his shares in Rat Pack Dunn and divest in order to become the Treasury Secretary, and he sold them to Blavatnik. Remember that? Those were good old days. I know you probably.
I like the movies that his wife made. Like they were homemade, but they were like intended to be dramatically, legitimately acted, and they were just something.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they were a very interesting couple. I always think of they're posing with the sheet of dollar bills being minted or whatever.
Yes, and like the white gloves or something, and holding it like it was like a Spider-Man villain sort of thing.
But with Bessent, who apparently Elon Musk didn't like, he probably because he doesn't want to tank the dollar and change everything to Doge crypto or whatever. Because Bessent is actually liked by hedge fund managers, business leaders, Wall Street, rich people, right? He's a business leader. Here from a story in Bloomberg, business leaders say they're relieved that Trump made a safe choice to lead the Department of Treasury after more unconventional selections to other cabinet posts. Unconventional selections is an interesting way to doing a lot of heavy lifting there. So he's a private hedge fund manager. And Bessent beat out Cantor Fitzgerald CEO Howard Lutnick, who was in the running to be Treasury Secretary. He was endorsed by Musk. That's who Musk wanted. But Trump put Lutnick in commerce instead. And the Dow shot up 500 points for a second on Monday morning because of this particular Treasury Secretary announcement. So very good for the wealthy and well-to-do.
Yeah, and also it kind of gives you an indication where Trump sees. It's like where he assigns certain attorneys, right? You find the real attorneys where he has real problems, and you see Alina Habba where he's like suing Hillary Clinton for the RICO, right? And so the same with Trump. It's like, okay, I may, put some Fox News host as the Secretary of Defense, but when it comes to Treasury, I'm going to do. Like, Bessent is a legitimate pick, right? I mean, he would, in most administrations, be able to go through confirmation, and I think the markets reflected their relief that he wasn't giving it to some windowsill licking, crayon eating fool that he saw on the TVs. So good for Treasury, good hopefully for the economy, and a little bit of pushback against some of the craziness, but it may not be enough.
No. No, and certainly think this guy will do his bidding. I'm also interested to see who he puts in as IRS commissioner, if he fires that guy and puts a friend in over at the IRS so that we can all get audited,
Maybe that guy who wears little, like the brick wall suits to all of his rallies.
Brick wall suit guy. Yeah.
Why not? Why not?
I think so. All right, we have more cabinet picks to get to, but we have to take a quick break. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. We've got more Hall of Fame patrons to thank, including Ren Special K. Kadu, David in Brooklyn, Laura Saba, Joan Qualls, A Dinosaur in Dental School, Amazing in Massachusetts, Je suis fatigué, Al Morenin, Greg Robin Smith, a.k.a. Benjamin Franklin Live, AG promises her next tour will be Baltimore, and Greg Crimer. Thank all of you so much. Thank you for going above and beyond as Hall of Famers. You are critical to the success of the show and couldn't do any of this without you. So thank you very much. So let's go back and dive into more cabinet picks. And somebody pointed out, Allison, this is all super early. Like most administrations don't have all this announced for, until easily mid-late December, sometimes even beginning of January before you get them all out. So Trump's moving quickly. And, I think whether that is not wanting to waste time like he did first administration or what other reasons might be out there, but we've got a pretty full slate, including Lori Chavez Doremer for Secretary of Labor. Now, she is an Oregon Republican, a congresswoman, and she cultivated a close relationship with some labor unions that most Republicans actually did. And how they view her in light of those relationships with the unions, we'll find out. Now, she narrowly lost her bid for a second term in Congress earlier this month, and she's headed to the Labor Department.
Yeah, so she's actually closer with unions than most Republicans are.
Right.
So,
and I don't
there's
know
going to be people who are upset with this,
Because that's one of Elon's pet projects, right? And Vivek's, right? Get rid of the, break down some of the power of the unions and, get that $2 an hour gig economy wage for the hardcore tech bro grind set mentality.
Yeah.
But we'll see. And so Trump praised her and she is the daughter of a Teamster. And again, she is and was close with unions. And so the question will be, certainly for the Secretary of Labor, that will be helpful, but how much sway she'll actually have when push comes to shove with a huge number of other cabinet members who don't seem to have much use for unions at all. We'll see how that works out. Dr. Jeanette Nishwat, nominee for Surgeon General. Guess what? She's a Fox News contributor, serves as medical director at City MD, which is a network of urgent care centers in New York and New Jersey. And guess what, RFK Jr.? She's pro-vaccine.
She is.
So we see the seeds already, the seeds of conflict. Staying in the medical arena for CDC director, Trump announced Dr. Dave Weldon. He's a 71-year-old MD and former lawmaker who served in the House from Florida. And he's been a strong critic of the CDC.
This guy is a piece of work.
Yes.
Because while Dr. Jeanette over at City MD is pro-vaccine, this guy is very wary of vaccines, right? He actually is one of the people who championed the long debunked notion that vaccines are linked to autism. So that's this guy.
Yeah, we're gonna have plagues breaking out of our own making before this is all done. Now, he served in Congress for 14 years, from 1995 until 2009, and attracted national attention for his involvement in a name from the past, the case of Terry Schiavo, a brain-damaged Florida woman whose husband's attempt to remove her feeding tubes and end her life attracted national attention and prompted interventions by congressional Republicans. Called the attempt to remove Schiavo's feeding tubes a, quote, grave injustice, unquote.
Mm-hmm. So that's him in charge of CDC.
Another doctor, Marty.
A strong critic of the CDC in charge of the CDC.
Hey, what could go wrong?
Disease control. Sure it's fine. I'm sure it's
disease
fine.
Control could go wrong. That's what's going to happen. We've got, disease control. It'll be back to like hanging cloves of garlic over the front door of your house to keep away the bubonic plague by the time we're, in those long, freaky, like bird masks with a long nose. God almighty, we're just going back to the Middle Ages.
Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine,
yes, disease control.
And warning, the CDC will be warning you against vaccines. I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. For Food and Drug Administration, keeping our food and drugs safe, we have Dr. Marty Makary, who's a Johns Hopkins surgeon and author, and he argued against pandemic lockdowns. And he promoted the herd immunity and argued against kids wearing masks because you know what? Just get enough dead people, and we'll everybody else will be fine.
Yeah, he's like remember when we all had chicken pox and we made our kids hang out together and lick each other's faces? We should do that for COVID. That was his way. Now we've got a former NFL football player, played for the Washington Commanders, right, for several years in the San Diego Chargers when they were in San Diego. Scott Turner is the HUD secretary.
Because of course, if it's got the word urban in it, that's where you got to put the black man, because
exactly.
there's our diversity token.
Yeah, there's the
person of color
the diversity guy. Yeah,
stick him in the urban stuff.
Now Tim Scott, meanwhile, is sitting there like, I got married and everything. Where's my job? And he looks like he got thrown under the bus. Now, Turner serves as chair of the Center for Education Opportunity at the America First Policy Institute, which is an outside group with close ties to Trump's transition team that has helped develop the president-elect's agenda, also known as Project 2025. And speaking of Project 2025, the author, one of the main authors, even though Trump has nothing to do with Project 2025, and he totally denounced it, Russ Vought, who worked at the OMB back in the day, has been tapped to head the OMB again. Now, was he the guy who helped Trump with the Impoundment Control Act thing to withhold the money from Zelensky, or was that before Russell Vought got there? I feel like it may have been before he got there.
Maybe, but I know that he certainly has been advancing, and Project, one of the many things argued by Project 2025 is exactly the authority of the president to refuse to spend money appropriated by Congress, which I'm sure won't come to a head very, very quickly when Trump says, Congress, I don't care. The money you gave to fill in the blank, I'm not going to spend it. And we'll see what the Supreme Court
that's what they're working on, impoundment.
But that is very much a key point that Project 2025 advocates for.
Yep. Who's next? Who do we got next?
Well, we got two. Let's over in the national security realm. We've got Alex Wong, who's the assistant to the president and principal deputy national security advisor. Now, Wong was previously in Trump's White House and served as deputy special representative for North Korea during the first Trump administration, where he, quote, helped negotiate my summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. You'll remember that summit where Trump was my favorite part of that is where he's sitting there with Kim Jong-un. There's some North Korean leaders. One of these North Korean generals is holding out his hand, and Trump's standing across from him saluting. And it's just like, oh my God. So yes, that he helped negotiate
national security. Cool.
Summit. Yes. Great. And speaking of national security.
Oh God.
We can go my two favorite. One is Dr. I'm not putting in quotations. I'll just say Dr. Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Director for Counterterrorism. Now, Trump said Gorka will be his Deputy Assistant to the President and serve as Senior Director for CT, which is within the National Security Council at the White House. Now, interestingly, Gorka's views on Islam, particular comments that he's made that violence is an intrinsic part of the Islamic faith, true controversy, to put it mildly. And his academic credentials, well, they've had a lot of questions asked about them without a lot of real satisfactory answers.
Yeah, he might be George Santos, right?
Maybe that he would, during his brief tenure, during the first administration, because he could not get and hold a top secret clearance, he would wander around the White House looking for meetings being held at the secret level where he could just go in and sit down because he wasn't allowed to go in the... It's like sitting like, is there a kids table in here? You got the hot dogs and chili mac in here for the kids. But he's back.
Isn't he also super fan of Viktor Orban?
Yes. The Lion of Budapest. He's an odd dude. He is just an odd dude, unqualified. Could say the same thing about Kash Patel.
He's like a more racist Steven Seagal.
Yes. And the thing is, like, there were people there were people who worked terrorism in the first Trump administration who had experience, right? I mean, you might like sit there and say, look, I couldn't be like you and work for the Trump administration, but you know CT, and you probably have a little bit, your views of what we need to do might differ from mine a little bit, but at least they're like, hey, you spent your career doing this and you kind of know what you're doing. That ain't Seb Gorka. And so I don't know why. I mean, it feels like there is this battle between the normie MAGA group and the Steve Bannon, Marge Taylor Greene, Elon burned down the building to its firmament MAGA. And that's where, there's an Axios article earlier today, and I've heard other rumbling that, the main thing that hasn't been announced yet is director of the FBI. And he hasn't said he's going to fire Chris Wray, but everybody anticipates that if Wray doesn't quit, he's going to be fired. And the question is, who's going to be the director? And, there were Mike Rogers came up, but I've heard that's, Axios says that's dead and not happening. And then the question is Kash Patel. And the problem with Kash is there's some question about whether he would be impossible to confirm as FBI director. So there's some talk about putting him in as the deputy director, which is not Senate confirmed, but also is a hard, I'm hopeful you ask Andy about it because Andy did the job, right? But it's a hard job. There's not enough time in the day to be the deputy director of the FBI. And to go into that job, I don't know how you do it without having spent a career in the FBI, understanding all the different programs and how the FBI works and all the different aspects of operational matters and tech and hiring and budget and
the way you do it is by not caring and trying to just dismantle the FBI.
But I don't, and the thing that like, if I'm evil, malevolent Pete and Trump wants to put me somewhere to do damage, the other problem with the deputy director of the FBI, it has authority, but it also comes with responsibility and accountability. So stuff is going to go wrong. And if you're the deputy director of the FBI, it's kind of hard to dodge that. And it's much easier to make yourself give yourself some goofy title and stick you as special assistant to the deputy assistant attorney general and DOJ. And then you can spend the entirety of your day uncovering the real Russia hoax and uncovering the plot against the king and getting ready to write your third children's book. You want to go somewhere where you have power, but you don't have accountability.
Yeah,
and
that's why I'm thinking kind of like sort of what he did with Vivek and Elon, like putting him in his own little consultancy to the FBI type situation where he doesn't have to be confirmed by the Senate and he doesn't have any accountability or no responsibility for anything that goes wrong. Right. I mean, seems like something more likely than the actual director of the FBI. But whoever he decides, if he does fire and puts in as director of the FBI, would be somebody Trump would expect to cooperate with somebody like Kash Patel if he were given some sort of a outside the government consultancy role like Doge for Vivek and Elon. But we'll see how it ends up playing out. It's going to be bad no matter what.
It is. There's some rumors that Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey might be in the running. I mean, he's filed a bunch of lawsuits that are super, were pleasing to Donald Trump. So we'll see whether or not he gets picked up or not. But yeah, it's going to be, and that's the problem is you would hope you can really break things at the FBI, at the CIA, at DOD, and they're smart enough to understand hey, we really don't want to break Treasury, but I don't see that same sort of desire or concern.
No.
Anyway.
And finally, for the person nominated to break the Department of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. Now, Rollins also, she was a co-founder and president of the America First Policy Institute we were talking about a minute ago. And she's a former White House aide. She was there during the president's first administration, President-elect's first administration. She served as the director of the Office of American Innovation and acting director of the Domestic Policy Council. And she is going to play a key role in renegotiating the trade agreement between U.S., Canada, and Mexico, which will probably involve imposing Trump's promised tariffs. So that's Brooke Rollins as Secretary of Agriculture. And that rounds out the cabinet. There's still some more positions that need to be decided. And then, like you said, potentially what's he going to do at the top of the FBI? But all the cabinet positions are filled now. Or not filled, nominated, I should say.
Nominated. Yeah. And the question becomes I think Are there any more fights in store where the Senate's going to say no? I can see, if he nominated Cash to be director of the FBI, you might see it there. I'm curious to see what sort of Tulsi, Gabbard, and Hegseth at DNI and DOD respectively, but it seems like I haven't seen a lot on Hegseth recently. There's been like a little burst of reporting on Tulsi and her PACs and where money has gone and what it was spent for and what it was not spent for, and people affiliated with some of those PACs who were also involved with some of the George Santos money stuff. And so there's, whether or not any of those things have enough leg to, make an issue come confirmation time, I don't know. But she, like Kash Patel, has no business being anywhere near the national security establishment. But that's where we're headed.
No, and I imagine there'll be a bunch of FARA filings with Pam Bondi. She's the one who, by the way, you have to register with as a foreign agent at the DOJ. And she herself was a foreign agent for Qatar. So
Yep.
she's the one who's going to be fielding all those. So I don't think we'll be seeing any FARA violations anytime soon. But that's the cabinet. And we will continue to talk about anything new that pops up with his appointments. And of course, Harry Dunn and I will be covering the confirmation process, which, like I said, should be very interesting because we still do have Democrats in the Senate who can ask these folks questions if there are either confirmation hearings or Senate confirmation votes, right? Because we know that Trump has floated the idea of recess appointments. So we'll cover all that. We have more to get to today. A lot of news, actually, including what's up with the 34 felony counts and the sentencing with Judge Juan Merchan. And then, of course, we'll update you on Rudy. But we have to take another quick break, so stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We have more Hall of Fame patrons to thank, including Steve Towle, Clover's Tree 73, Roberta Reed, Democracy Cannot Survive Unregulated Capitalism, Anonymous Buddy, Karen Sherman. Devil went down to Georgia. He was looking for an election to steal. He was in a bind. He was way behind by 11,780 votes. Janine Lorga, skintwalletusa.com, and Veterinary for America 2024, The Tyrant We Deserve. And of course, our good friend, please don't read this on the pod. We don't need a call out. Thanks for what you do. So thank you so much to all of our Hall of Fame patrons. We really appreciate you. Let's head up to New York, Pete, for an update on those 34 felony counts. You'll recall when we last spoke about this, DA Alvin Bragg asked Judge Merchan to pause his immunity ruling and pause the sentencing that was scheduled for November 26th so that Alvin Bragg could first defend the verdict against a November 8th letter Trump and his lawyers wrote to the judge asking him to completely dismiss and vacate the verdict, the jury verdict, and the 34 felony count conviction. Now, this story is from Adam Reese at NBC. He writes, the judge presiding over Trump's New York hush money trial on Friday postponed the sentencing that was scheduled for next week to allow for more time for arguments on whether the case should be dismissed. State Judge Juan Merchan ruled after Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg's office said in a court filing this week that it would not oppose a motion by Trump's attorneys to delay his sentencing on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records to interfere in the 2016 election. In a very brief order, Merchan set new deadlines in early December for Trump's lawyers and prosecutors to make their arguments about whether the case should be dismissed in light of his being elected president. The defense must file by December 2nd, and the prosecution has until December 9th to respond. Merchan also delayed deciding on another pending question about whether the verdict should be set aside because of the Supreme Court's ruling on immunity. He was originally scheduled to decide on that by November 12th, and then it was postponed to November 19th, and now it's indefinitely postponed. He did not schedule a new date for sentencing either. Trump, as we know, is scheduled to be inaugurated on January 20th.
Yeah, and the article goes on with everybody's favorite Trump spokesman, Stephen Chung, called the ruling, quote, a decisive win for the president-elect and criticized the case as, guess what, a witch hunt and a hoax.
Hey, Pete, wouldn't a witch hunt include sentencing?
You would think, right? I am beyond frustrated.
Like if we were witch hunting, we would have sentenced him in July.
Yeah, right. It's the whole thing about like, yes, everybody was out, deep state plot to get Trump, only we had all this information that everybody kept secret rather than give out and cause him to lose the election in 2016.
Yes, no trials happen except
Makes
this.
no
His
sense.
sentencing was postponed and he won the election, but there's a deep state after him.
Yes, there's a witch. Yes, it makes no sense. Now, article continues, Trump had been scheduled to be sentenced on November 26, but his attorneys argued that the sentencing hearing and the entire case should be immediately dismissed because of presidential immunity protections, which they contend are already in place as a result of his quote-unquote overwhelming victory on Election Day.
Smallest margin of victory in quarter century.
Yes. Quote, just as a sitting president is completely immune from any criminal process, so too is President Trump as president-elect.
No.
Trump lawyers and nominees, Todd Blanche and Emile Beauvais, argued in a filing Wednesday. They've also argued he can't be sentenced after his term in office because that's too long to wait. Now, Trump last week said he plans to nominate Blanche and Beauvais for high-ranking posts at the Justice Department in his new administration.
Yep, and we knew that. Prosecutors in Manhattan said they would challenge Trump's efforts to dismiss the hush money case, but acknowledged that his sentencing might need to take place after he leaves office. Quote, the people deeply respect the office of the president, are mindful of the demands and obligations of the presidency, and acknowledge that Trump's inauguration will raise unprecedented legal questions. But given the need to balance competing constitutional interests, consideration must be given to various non-dismissal options that may address any concerns raised by the pendency of post-trial criminal proceedings during the presidency, such as deferral of all remaining criminal proceedings until after the end of the defendant's upcoming presidential term. And this looks a lot like Jack Smith's filing today, and we'll talk about that in a second. We're going to go over it in detail on the Jack podcast, but it does sort of play into this because that's the both prosecutors are thinking along the same lines. Like, we can't just let it go. There has to be a mechanism because the rule of law matters and no one's above it, right? Now, Trump was convicted on all counts in May, after a weeks-long trial at which he was accused of having falsified business records to cover up his reimbursement of hush money to his then lawyer, Michael Cohen, who paid Stormy Daniels in the closing days of the 2016 presidential election. Now, Daniels claimed she had a sexual encounter with Trump in 2006. Trump has denied that. Trump was first scheduled to be sentenced in July, like I said, but the proceeding was put off in the wake of the U.S. Supreme Court ruling that month that expanded presidential immunity protections in the federal case against Trump. After that ruling, his attorney said the New York conviction and its underlying indictment should totally be dismissed, arguing that the Supreme Court's decision means prosecutors shouldn't have been permitted to use, I think, 3 pieces of trial evidence against him.
Yeah, the Manhattan jury verdict marked the first time a former U.S. president had ever been convicted of a crime. The case was the only one of 4 criminal cases brought against Trump after he left office in 2021 to go to trial. The 2 federal cases are winding down as a result of his Election Day win, and a state case in Georgia has been moving slowly as Trump and some of his co-defendants have sought to have the prosecutor disqualified. Not in this article, because it happened afterwards. Jack Smith is moving to and is in the process of shutting the federal cases down. Now, the article continues. Their appeal, this is in New York, was set to be argued in December, but the appeals court abruptly canceled that hearing this week.
So, yeah. And what's interesting about that Georgia case and moving it from December to whenever they haven't scheduled it yet is that by Georgia law, that has to be resolved within 2 court periods or whatever. And so they're on a time crunch. So we'll see what they end up doing with that Florida case. And as you may have heard, you mentioned, Pete, Jack Smith filed a motion today on Monday to dismiss the January 6th election subversion case against Trump, which will allow Jack Smith to file a report with Merrick Garland. He would not have been able to file a full report if the case had remained open. So a lot of people were like, why not just stay on and let Trump fire you? Because then he wouldn't get to write a report. And although, what difference is the report going to make? What are we going to see that we didn't already know from the 165-page evidence summary known as the immunity brief from Jack Smith? Probably not much, but we do deserve the report. We paid for it. And I would, frankly, I would like to see it. And it's up to Merrick Garland whether he releases it and how much of it is released. But Jack Smith is asking the judge to dismiss the case without prejudice. So while it's very unlikely that in 2029, if Trump were to leave office and a new Democratic administration came in with a new Democratic attorney general, while the chances are very slim that they would pick this case up again. Memories aren't fresh, and they could be time barred by the statute of limitations. And I talk about that in my most recent Substack article, MullerSheWrote.com. We're going to talk about it on the Jack podcast too. But they could ask the court that, the old OLC memos say that time should be told, but you'd have to ask a court for that, which, it's going to be up to the Supreme Court. Do we really think they're going to let that happen?
No. And Trump's going to be how old? 80 what-year-old Trump at that point?
No.
I can't. And I have almost every expectation he's going to pardon himself on the way out the door.
No, right. But make him pardon himself. My friend said, make the old bastard pardon himself. Great. But he doesn't want to shut the door completely and ask for this to be dismissed with prejudice. So there leaves the door open, but very slim little way to crawl through that door. So that's what's happening there. That's, given all the work that we've put in and just covering that for the last, 100+ weeks is it's a sad day for the rule of law. I lay the blame directly at the feet of the Supreme Court. I know other people lay the blame elsewhere. But were it not for the Supreme Court, this very corrupt Supreme Court purchased by Leonard Leo and Harlan Crow, and other billionaires of interest, were it not for them, that January 6th trial would have happened in March.
Yeah. And again, there are all kinds of places that, contributed to the delay. And I agree with you. I think ultimately it was the Supreme Court and the speed and way in which they approached the various, rulings that they engaged in. And also, not on so much the criminal side, but Mitch McConnell had a huge role. Like Mitch McConnell could have caused Donald Trump to be impeached. And had he chosen to do that, I think there was enough evidence. Like Nancy Mace was, everybody right after January 6th was like, oh, this is too much, too far. And had Mitch McConnell said, yeah, and we need to impeach him, I think that would have happened. So again, that's not on the criminal side of things, but, if we're looking for people to be angry at, don't want to leave Mitch McConnell
Don't want to leave Mitch out.
Discussion.
Don't want to leave Mitch out.
Mitch, please.
Right. We have some good news in the form. Most news about Rudy Giuliani is good for us, and we're going to talk about that after this one last quick break. So everybody stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, welcome back. We have our last round of Hall of Fame patrons to thank, including Kimberly D. Steffen, Fran Reichenbach, Mr. Stu Pedazzo, Jens Alstrup Rasmussen, Pete's new catchphrase, you've been thunderstruck, Star Lanus, Mr. Halfspeed, Christine G. Passion, Sharon Tukalski, Catherine Gilbert White is totally awesome at her job, and don't memory hole the sacrifices Americans made for each other during the pandemic as once-in-a-generation display of true patriotism. And as you mentioned, as you teased before the break and at the beginning of the show, is a happy tradition, and clean up on Aisle 45. We're going to finish the show with an update on Rudy Giuliani. Rudy also not showing up on any of these cabinet nominations. Rudy conspicuously absent from any discussion of a role in the next administration. Now, this is first up from Politico. 2 former Georgia election workers are asking a federal judge to hold Rudy Giuliani in contempt of court for repeating false claims that have already led to a $148 million defamation judgment against him. Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss say Giuliani repeated baseless claims on an episode of his podcast last week, saying that they counted fraudulent ballots in the 2020 election. Quote, these statements repeat the exact same lies for which Mr. Giuliani has already been held liable, and which he agreed to be bound by court order to stop repeating, said Michael Gottlieb, an attorney for Freeman and Moss, writing in a 14-page motion which was filed in Washington, D.C. federal court. It continues, the court should hold Mr. Giuliani in civil contempt and, following a hearing if necessary, impose sanctions calculated to ensure Mr. Giuliani's compliance with the consent injunction. The conflict is now in the hands of U.S. District Judge Beryl Howell, who is this is not in the political article, a little bit of a badass, in that she presided over Giuliani's defamation trial last year and found him liable for the massive payout. The Obama-appointed judge ordered Giuliani to respond to the contempt request by December 2nd and to come to Washington, D.C. for a December 12th hearing. Howell also cautioned Giuliani that failing to respond to the motion would result in an automatic ruling for contempt.
That's interesting because and I asked this question on Blue Sky, and come to Blue Sky if you're not on Blue Sky. Blue Sky is awesome.
Yes,
I'm at the same at Mueller, she wrote. So this would be civil contempt, not criminal contempt. Criminal contempt is like something that what Bannon had and what Pete Navarro had, right? And so a president can't pardon someone away from civil contempt. So if Judge Howell is like, yep, I'm going to hold you in contempt, and either throws him in jail until he retracts his BS comments, or usually jail's not the first thing. It's usually fines or sanctions and things like that. Donald Trump, once he's in office, can't do anything. At least he's not supposed to, unless the Supreme Court makes a new rule for the ages that allows it to happen, because civil contempt is an inherent power of the court. And to allow the executive to come in and mess with that would be a separation of powers problem. But again, I put nothing past this Supreme Court. But anyway, that's where we are with that. So that's contempt for him continuing to defame them, right? But there's more. There's more potential contempt, Pete. This is from Judge Lewis Lyman. He's issued a ruling. This ruling came after. Remember when Rudy was forced to go to this hearing in person, but said he couldn't because there's no microphones in New York.
Podcasting equipment, right?
Had to fly down.
Nowhere in the however many
Florida.
boroughs in New York is there a microphone. Yes.
No, of course not. There's no podcasters in New York, Pete. So that after that hearing, this is the ruling that resulted from that hearing. He wrote, in light of the defendant's noncompliance, and by the way, this was about the fact that it had been more than 7 days and he hadn't turned his stuff over to receivership. And then he showed up in his car, remember, down in Palm Beach, the Lauren Bacall Mercedes that was supposed to be handed to Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, title and deed and keys days earlier. So here's what he writes. In light of defendant's noncompliance, plaintiffs' receivers have issued new directives to defendant pursuant to the turnover order. The court has reviewed the directives and finds they are consistent with the authorized by the turnover order. Accordingly, and for the avoidance of doubt, the court orders that defendant Giuliani shall comply with the following instructions provided by the plaintiffs on pain of contempt. So this is your last warning, buddy. By no later than 5 p.m. Friday, December 6th, Mr. Giuliani shall segregate all receivership property located at the CTS facility, that's a storage facility, from property that is not subject to the turnover order. So by Friday, you got to separate all the stuff that you're supposed to turn over that you hid over in this storage unit. You have to separate it all out. Now, number 2, by that same date and time, Mr. Giuliani shall provide a detailed list containing photos of the segregated receivership property located at the CTS facility sufficient to show the size and the quantity of that property. Show us pictures, proof of life that you still have this stuff and haven't sold it. Right? You have to send us photos by December 6th. By Monday, 3 days later, December 9th, the receivers will provide Mr. Giuliani with the location of a New York-based storage facility and the date and time when Mr. Giuliani shall deliver all of the receivership property located at the CTS facility. All right, so that's what Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss have to do. By Monday, December 9th, they have to say, all the stuff that you sent us photos of, you bring it to this address. On this date, at this time, you shall. Mr. Giuliani, number 4, shall deliver all of the receivership property stored at the CTS facility to the New York-based storage facility provided by the receivers no later than Friday, December 13th. So that Friday, he's got a week to deliver it all. That's the latest date he can deliver it. And by the way, the reason he has to go over this in detail is because Rudy Giuliani is a jerk. That's why he said, for the avoidance of doubt, here's what you must do. By this day, you have to do this. By this day, we want photos. And then by this day, you have to tell him where you want it delivered. And then by this day, you must deliver it by December 13th. And finally, defendant Giuliani, his attorneys, agents, and persons in active concert or participation with him or them shall not transfer, encumber, or interfere with any of the defendant's property located at Corporate Transfer and Storage, CTS, or America First Warehouse, AFX, until the receiver files notice on the docket that the above conditions have been satisfied. And if you don't do all that, Rudy Giuliani, it looks like this judge is going to hold you in contempt. So that's where we're at.
Hopefully this will finally start bringing closure to, they've got the properties, right? And I think the Florida one may still be up for some
There's a January trial
hearing,
or something,
right, for that
hearing
or
whatever.
And then question about Andrew's possession of some of the World Series rings and other watches that he might have been gifted. But they're at least, you're right. All of this is because Rudy is playing games and not following the law that he spent a huge chunk of his career enforcing, which is kind of sad and pathetic, but seems like the kind of end of the road. Because again, there hasn't been a lot of Rudy sighting in MAGA world. So
I'm surprised it's not even more detailed. Like, you must put the things in the photos that have been delegated and proved to still exist in your ownership and possession into some sort of a truck and drive it and or transport it to this address, and then you must allow for removal of said items in photographs that are the actual items to be placed into this new storage facility without encumbrance. Like, I'm surprised it's not more detailed, right? And you must be listening to NPR on the radio while you're driving over, because if you don't give these exact instructions to Rudy Giuliani on pain of contempt, he won't do it. He has proven over and over again that he won't do it. So we'll keep an eye on this. So lots of stuff due December 2nd, some stuff due December 9th, some stuff due December 13th. And we'll be covering it here with Harry Dunn instead of you. I'm going to miss you, my friend.
Yeah, I miss you too. It's been amazing. It's sad, but Harry will be great. So looking forward to listening to y'all.
Well, you are going to be with me this Thursday for the bonus.
Yes, for patrons, the last hurrah. Some swearing,
lots of swearing with your new Patagonia swearing jacket.
Yes, exactly. Warm, toasty warm.
But just for this final bonus episode occasion. Yeah, if you're a patron at the $2 level, I think, you get this whole second episode. And there's a lot of swearing in it. And it's going to be Pete's last episode. So if you want to join, patreon.com /aisle45pod, AISLE45POD. Any final thoughts on this final public show, my friend?
No, it's been amazing. Can't believe how many episodes we've done because they flew. And there's so much that happened between the beginning, first episode, and now. So it's been a privilege, been an honor. Thank all of you. And we'll see you down the road.
Well, thanks for agreeing to do it when I picked up the phone in January of 2023 and asked you to. I was thrilled. Yeah. So it's been wonderful. And it's not like we're never going to talk again. And I'm going to tell everybody everything that you say offline from now on. So mind your P's and Q's. Everybody, we'll see you on the bonus. And if you aren't a patron, we'll see you next week on the public episode with a new co-host, former Capitol Police officer, an American hero, and my friend, Harry Dunn. Thanks so much. I've been Allison Gill.
And I'm Pete Struck.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill, with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.